Yeah, before we get started, just real quick, I have a feature on my watch, and it goes off every now and then. It says, "It looks like you're in a loud environment." Sometimes this goes off when I'm by myself. This morning, it went off twice. Once, when I was over there with the junior hires, and they were singing worship songs. And second, when the folks came out of the tub and you cheered. I know there's a lot of football fans here, and I know everyone's excited about the Niners. But I'm really glad to be a part of a community that cheers for that. So that was deeply moving to me, yeah. All right, let's get into it. I want to ask a question for those in the room. How many of you in this room are really, would you consider yourself a pretty good multitasker? This is not about bragging or feeling better than other people. It's just an objective statement. I, human A, am good at multitasking. Just go ahead and raise your hand if that's you. You're pretty good at multitasking. Okay, cool. How many of you would say you're actually kind of the opposite? You're like not good at it, don't point. It's just mean. Okay, we're gonna talk about multitasking this morning. Also, linguistically, some of you know I'm a former English teacher. I love kind of where words come from. Do you know where the term multitasking, the word multitasking even came from? See, I would have thought it came from neuroscience or some sort of psychology. Do you know it's actually a technical term? It's actually a computer word. It's a nerd word, yes. It was actually invented in 1965 by the IBM Corporation, International Business Machine. As you know, IBM actually has a lot of roots out here in Silicon Valley. And in 1965, IBM introduced the 360 mainframe computer, and I'm about to blow some of your minds. For those of you who are born in a year that starts with 2, I want to show you something. This is what a computer used to look like. I got these pictures from a Reddit post, which actually looked at the original publicity photos for IBM, for the IBM 360 mainframe computer in 1965. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the size of a room. Here's some other photos. Here's another one. There's another one. That's just monstrous. Love the orange. Very, very late 60s. There's this. It's just a monstrous machine. I also noticed something else. Maybe this is just me. In every single picture that IBM released, there was always a man and a woman. And the woman was always pressing a button. She's there changing the reels. Next one, press that button. And then this woman, press that button. Apparently in 1965, all women were allowed to do in computers was press buttons. I'm really glad we've come so far. And the idea of this computer, the IBM 360 mainframe computer, IBM actually said it was so powerful it actually could do multiple tasks at once. It could multitask. And over time, people began to believe in this idea of multitasking. And we started applying it to all manner of things, including not just computers, but ourselves. And then in the late 80s, early 90s, we began to celebrate the ability to multitask. We gave it places of prominence on our resumes. We talked about it in job interviews. It became a badge of honor. I am a person who's able to multitask. And why? I think in large part is because we have come to believe, especially here in the Bay Area, a particular story about what a meaningful and successful life looks like. And that is always a life of hyper-productivity, hyper-efficiency, and the ability to complete tasks at a superhuman speed. We've come to believe the lie that the best version of you is the one that can achieve the most, the quickest. But in truth, guys, this is a success script for a computer, not a human. And they are different. Neuroscience and cognitive psychology actually tells us something pretty shocking. And for those of you who call yourself successful multitaskers, here's the truth. humans can't really multitask. They can't. In fact, that computer that I showed you, that the word multitask is actually founded on, it can't multitask either. Even my computer, which is very fast and very powerful, and I have multiple apps and programs on it all the time, it looks like it's doing multiple things at once, but in reality, what it is doing is switching so quickly between the programs, it's imperceptible to you and I. It looks like it's doing them simultaneously, but it is not, and neither can humans. Those of you who are multitask, what you're doing is you are switching in between tasks so quickly that other people might not even notice. But you might notice. Multitasking is incredibly draining. Here's what happens. In cognitive behavioral psychologists tell us this, neuroscientists tell us this. Each switch between tasks has a cognitive cost, a drain. There's an increased chance of error. There's mental fatigue and emotional depletion. This is why researchers, cognitive and neuroscience researchers like Gloria Mark, describe task switching as like mentally erasing your brain's whiteboard and then writing something else on it. Researchers now prefer different terms to multitasking. They now use the words like task switching or context switching, or this is my new favorite one, divided attention. Do you want a nurse that's good at multitasking? Sure. Do you want a nurse that's good at divided attention? I'd like all the attention, please. Cal Newport, in his book, Deep Work, used a metaphor for humans that our brains and our thoughts are like snails. They move real slow. And then when they get safe, they put out their feelers and they start to slowly move with that slime trail. This is a snail. This is me as a snail. But then what happens when you poke a snail, right? It goes, and it goes inside, and it takes a while to come back out and then start snail moving again, right? This is our brains. You might not believe that, but that's actually how deep work happens. We are in this series called Simple Faith, and we're talking about the beautiful simplicity of following Jesus. I want to be clear about this. It's not simple. There's simplicity to it. And so we're trying to figure out how we can follow Jesus in a way that offers peace and joy that he offers. And part of this is to be honest about what multitasking, divided attention, is doing to our souls. I think about the first century Roman Stoic philosopher Seneca, who famously said, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." What he's trying to say is we have to be people who are rooted in one place and time. And even our attention, if we're divided, will be nowhere. If Seneca was right, and he was, then put another way, to do everything is to do nothing. Or to try to be everything is to be nothing. And even neuroscientists tell us that. There's a neuroscientist from MIT, very famous, his name's Earl Miller, and he wrote a series of articles and books on this. Here's what he said. He said, you and I can only think of a very small bit of information, one train of thought at a time. So when you think you're multitasking, what you're actually doing is task switching. You're switching back and forth. And then later in the article, he has this line, and it arrested me. He said this, we're very single-minded. We have very limited cognitive capacity. Very limited cognitive capacity. To which I say, speak for yourself, Earl. I don't like that to be true, but the idea is this, and this is, again, very important. Humans can't really multitask. We can't. We're not good at this. So what do? If multitasking actually results in divided attention, if it results in exhaustion and depletion, and if it results in us not having the right priorities and feeling interiorly scattered, how many of you can relate to that? That's just our reality. That's my reality. So what do? Let's get some advice from Jesus. Let's follow him. And luckily, this is not new. There's a story from the New Testament about a person who I think many of you will soon very much relate to. I know I do. And Jesus has a very deep relationship with this person, a long-standing, deep, long relationship. And in that he enters into this situation. And he has some advice and some invitations for her, and I think for us. So let's get into the story. It's found in Luke chapter 10. If you'd like to follow along, we have it on the screen. It's also there in your Bible, which is where I got it from, to put it on the screen. Luke 10, chapter 10, verse 38. Here's the story. Some of you are familiar with this. Some of you, this might be new. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. Now, just parenthetically, Jesus is going to spend lots of time with his family. They're going to show up multiple times. He's going to have multiple interactions. Martha has a sister named Mary, and they have a brother named Lazarus. And Jesus was very, very close to them. In fact, he spent one of his last days on earth with them right before he would go to the cross. Anyway, she had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed. Indeed, only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." Now, some of you are a little bit upset right now. You're like, what's going on here? So Mary gets a free pass because she sits down and does no work? And the bottom line is, there's this sense, for those of you who are doers, who do a lot, there's some resentment creeping in. It's like, oh yeah, sure, so everyone gets to sit down. That's all fine and good till somebody wants lunch. So what are we to do with this? And I've heard this taught, and frankly, if I'm honest, taught very poorly, sometimes by pastors who say things like, really what this story is about is the imperative of us learning theologically at the feet of Jesus, which is what Mary is doing, and not having our minds on earthly things like tasks. And I got to be honest, although that is important, and Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus like a disciple, that is critically important, that is not the message of this. Hospitality, which is what Martha is doing, is a big deal in our world, but in the first century, hospitality was critically important. In the first century world, it was not just a matter of moral obligation, it was also about social reputation, but more than that, it was about religious faithfulness to Jewish people. To welcome a guest well wasn't just a courtesy. It wasn't just being nice. This has nothing to do with Martha Stewart. It was a sacred duty for good Jews who believed that God was the God of hospitality. Later on, early Christians would say that hospitality is a core virtue for anyone who wants to be in church leadership. The word is philoxenia, love of stranger. In the early Christian church, Paul and others put as a list of qualifications for church leadership, hospitality as a core virtue that must be present in anyone who wants to lead a church of Jesus, because Jesus himself was a philoxenia, love of stranger. He came from heaven and made strangers friends and friends into family. That's what Jesus does. So hospitality is supremely important in the ancient world. It was a sacred duty. Martha is doing exactly what she should be doing. In fact, hospitality in Scripture is so important that for Martha to have ignored it would have been actually an abrogation of her sacred duties. Jesus is not rebuking the work Martha is doing. Jesus is naming what the work is doing to her. And you can see Martha isn't doing super great. Look at how it comes out. You can tell she's not doing super great. It says that Martha, she came to him and said, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." She's not doing great. Look, first of all, she's turned service into deep resentment. What's supposed to be a heart of service, now she's just resentful. She's deeply resentful of someone who's less busy than her, never a good sign. There's zero joy in this statement, not a lot of joy. And she's lost the plot. This busyness has caused Martha to lose the plot. The problem isn't that Martha is being hospitable. The problem is that in her desire to be hospitable, she's distracted from the actual point of hospitality. In the ancient world, the point of hospitality is to prepare and to be present with people who are in your home. And Martha is so busy in preparations for Jesus, she's missing the point of the preparation, which is the very presence of Jesus himself. Her hands are full, but more dangerously, her heart is crowded. Her activity is faithful, but her attention is fractured. It is possible for us to do the right things, but not be in the right space, and do it in such a way that it messes everything up. Have you ever experienced this? Let me tell you a story in my own life from a long time ago, last year. Like seriously, 14 days ago. We were, as part of Christmas, we gifted our family as part of our present to our children. We were going to go to Disneyland for 2 days, and we were very excited about it. And we were going to leave right after the Sunday service 2 weeks ago. Now, we're going to leave to drive after the service, and so I said to my family, listen, kids, we're going to leave at this time. Here's the time. That's more than enough time for everyone to do what they need to do. So we leave and we get ready, and that time comes and it goes. And we leave our house, our driveway, 18 minutes after the time I had clearly set. And I remember driving away, and I was irritated. I was irritated. Don't say preach. I'm the bad guy in this story, so hold on. And I remember I was driving and I was irritated. We're going on a family vacation. To Disneyland. I should have been filled with joy, but I'm irritated. I'm missing the plot. I'm going to drive for 6 hours in a state of irritation because everyone was 18 minutes late. Everyone. My 2 children were 18 minutes late. Despite, again, they had ample warning. You're old enough to know. You need to go to the bathroom anyway. And I'm driving, and I'm irritated, and I thought to myself, what are you doing? Actually, that's not true at all. My wife said to me, what are you doing? And then I was like, what am I doing? Yes. For me, irritation or exhaustion are like dashboard warning lights that something's wrong internally. And if I live with irritation and I live with exhaustion, if I get irritated by people I should be loving or I do love, these are bad signs that something's off inside me. Not that I'm doing the wrong things. Driving to Disneyland was part of my job. Martha had a beautiful job of hospitality. It's that I'm doing it in the wrong way. Oftentimes, I see this with parents of kids. Now, young kids, sometimes parents are like, man, these kids, I know they were going to be a lot of work, but no one told me how much. And I get it. Like, their little kids are like need meters. They just have needs all the time. And then I also hear from parents who are preteens or teens, and I thought once my kids would become preteens or teens, it would get easier. It does not. It gets harder. In some ways, I would say parenting a preteen or a teen today is actually harder than it's ever been before. The more is required of you as a parent. I get it. And so sometimes parents will come to me and they're frustrated. They're like, man, I would get so much more done if I didn't have these kids around. But guys, kids aren't a distraction to the important thing. They are the important thing. Like, this is a sacred task that we've been given. And so we can parent, and I've done it and you've done it, we can parent from a place of depletion and irritation and exhaustion and miss the sacred task. But more than that, miss the joy of being with Jesus. Sometimes, I hope I haven't done this, but maybe I have, and if I have, I think it's wrong. Sometimes people spiritualize exhaustion. Well, I'm a Christian, and that's just required. I'm just tired. I'm tired. No one else is going to serve, so I guess I'm going to do it. And they kind of play the role of martyr, even though in our religion, there's only one martyr. I got to say this. Jesus never praises exhaustion, ever. He challenges and interrupts it. Always. So let's not spiritualize exhaustion. So what do we do? How does Jesus respond? And again, look at the verse. Luke 10:40, it's pretty clear what's happening. Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. And maybe you sense that in your own life too. Maybe you really relate to this. Maybe your hands are full, your heart is crowded, and maybe in the midst of faithful activity you know God's given to you, you found your attention fractured. Maybe the busyness of life, the wide-ranging list of tasks and to-dos has untethered you from being with Jesus. Maybe worry has more of a constant presence than the very presence of God. Maybe you find yourself constantly anxious or endlessly striving or divided. Maybe you find your interior life splintering. So what do? That's where Martha was. She's distracted. So how does Jesus respond? And I want to show you what Jesus does. First, I want you to pay attention to how he addresses her. Luke 10:41, Martha, Martha, the Lord answered. This is called a double address. It's when someone's name is uttered twice by God or Jesus. It happens a couple of different times. And every single time, it is profoundly important. And I want you to hear this. Jesus is not rebuking Martha. He is reminding her of his love. He wants something better for her, and he wants something better for us. There's a couple different times when God says someone's name twice, and they are important seminal moments in the story of Scripture. Just a couple here. Abraham, Abraham. God calls out to Abraham as he's about to sacrifice Isaac and stops him and provides a ram instead. Moses, God calls out from the burning bush to have him enter into salvation history with a God who rescues and oppressed people from slavery. Samuel, God calls out to the young Samuel to invite him into a life and a journey as a prophet. Simon, Jesus says to Peter, Satan has wanted to sift you like wheat, but I've prayed for you. And he calls him to found his church and be one of the leaders in the early church. Saul, why do you persecute me? Jesus says to Saul, to call him to be a missionary and the writer of so much of the New Testament. And even there's a moment where Jesus stands over a whole city and says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I have longed to gather you underneath my wings like a hen gathers her chicks. Each time when God says someone's name twice, it's deeply relational, but there's an urgency to it because something has to change. God's about to do something, but this term, saying somebody's name twice, is deeply relational. There's an urgency, and God's saying something has to change. This is critically important. How you imagine Jesus saying, Martha, Martha, might tell you everything that you believe about how God views you. What's the tone of his voice? How does he say it? I think we have to imagine the most relational, the most loving, the most connected version of Jesus saying to Martha, out of deep love and compassion, like, I see you. I know everything that's going on, and I want something better for you. What does he say? And then what's he say? Jesus, as he always does, correctly addresses the problem. He's a wonderful physician. He says, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things. Worried and upset. I want to do a little bit of work here on these two words because they are just pregnant with meaning. And I think if we just pull them apart and just sit with them for a moment, I think it can do some work in us. Jesus says you're worried and upset about many things. These two words. The first one is now, which means worried or anxious. Jesus would use this in Matthew to say, do not worry about tomorrow, because today's got enough worry of its own. And then the other word is thoribazo, which means distracted or disturbed interiorly in your soul. So let's just look at those four words compounded by these two. Worried, anxious, distracted, and disturbed. Any of those resonate with you right now? Does any of those jump off the screen at you? Is one of those a constant companion with you right now? Worry. Do you worry a lot? Are you chronic and you're worried? Do you find your thoughts continually going back to the same thing? Anxious. Is there a fear about something in the future that you're afraid will happen or you know is going to happen, you don't know how you're going to get through it? And anxiety raises your blood pressure and fear enters? Is anxiety a companion? Distracted? Is there something that's distracting you from the important things in this world? I know as Jay was talking last week, I was on my phone just deleting apps. I was like, I know this thing is bad. I gotta get out of this. I looked at my year-long kind of, here's how much time you spent on this app. And it was like, what? That's a lot of time. I'm not talking about Google Maps, right? Or Apple Maps if you're an Apple guy or girl, whatever. Not Maps, not Spotify, that doesn't count. I'm talking about like no human should spend that much time on that, Maybe you're distracted. I think for a lot of young people, I think it is about the phone. My daughter said, she was telling me, when I study, I have to put my phone like under my mattress. Like I have to get it away. I can't study. It's too much. And then disturbed. Disturbed. Maybe disturbed by things that are going on in your own life. Or recently, we've had a lot of prayer requests for people carrying the hard things for the people that they love. And that's deeply disturbing. That's really hard to carry something that's really difficult that you can't change from somebody else. Or, if I'm honest, I got to be super careful here, but I think some of you will know exactly what I'm talking about. My early in the week, my wife was like, hey, did you hear about? And then she shared with me a news event, and I started digging into the news event, and the more I dug into it, the more disturbed I got. And the more unsettled I was in my soul. And somebody posted, if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. And I was like, man, but outrage isn't good for me. It's not a fruit of the Spirit. And yet I can't be blind to what the world's going through. How do I carry this? And this is not even in my city. This is somewhere else. This is, how do I have news now about things happening, not even in the city where I live. I can do nothing about this. And I realized that, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do with all of this disturbing? Maybe that's you. Maybe you understand exactly what I'm talking about. A friend wrote to me, you can choose something other than voluntary misery that sucks you in through algorithmic doom scrolling. I was like, okay, well, he has no tact, but he's kind, what do we do with that disturbing? What do we do? How do we carry that? How do we walk with God in that? And so I want to point us right back to Jesus' antidote. So he sees Martha with kindness, tenderness, and deep, deep abiding love. He correctly pinpoints the problem, and then his solution. Few things are needed. Indeed, only one. Me. I'm the one. Focus on me. And that's what I realized in my worry, in my anxiety, in my distraction, and in my disturbing. I need to focus on the one. And then somehow things begin to sift and be reordered. Peace begins to come. So I'm going to give you 3 verses. I'm going to read 3 verses over you, and perhaps one of them is the proper antidote. So first, Matthew 6, famously, seek first the kingdom, his kingdom and his righteousness, and all of these things will be given to you as well. Maybe you need to seek first his kingdom. Maybe part of our dividedness, our tension, our fear, our grabbiness, our interior franticness is because we have misordered our loves. Maybe we've been told by our culture or told by our families of origin or even told by ourselves, if I don't have this thing, then I can't be happy if I don't have this thing, so I got to go after it. But then there's also the God thing, and this verse helps us order Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and everything else will be added. That's a clarifying statement Jesus is offering to us, to really center and focus our hearts and lives on the one thing. And somehow, and I think about our second semester seniors, both in college and high school, think about how many fears and concerns. What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to make these decisions? But if you seek God and you walk with God, can you ever be lost? No. Seek first his kingdom and everything else will come. Just that's clarifying to me. Another, that's from Jesus. This is from Paul. And this is a command to the early church. A command and a promise. Let me read both. Do not be anxious about anything. By the way, I looked up the Greek. Do you know what the word anything in the Greek means? It means anything. But in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, that's the command. Present your requests to God. And then the promise, the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. The word guard Paul uses is a military word. It's like a garrison surrounding a city at night so that its inhabitants can sleep safely. It's a big deal. But look at the command. Present your requests to God. Some of you don't know that God is actively asking you, present your needs to me. Don't dismiss them. Don't pretend they're not there. Don't despiritualize or unspiritualize. Present your request to your Father in heaven who loves you. It doesn't mean you're going to get everything, but it means you have full access to the Father. Some of you don't know that. Or you live in a theology where you've been told that God cares about other people, but not really you. That's not true. When she was little, my daughter used to run in the middle of the night when she was scared. She'd have bad dreams, or she'd be woken up, or she would just run in. And somehow my wife trained her to always run to my side of the bed. It was great. I didn't mind. Do you think I ever looked at her and said, "How dare you disturb my bedchamber, little one?" Like it was one of the great joys of my life to tend to her needs. She has full permission to wake me up at any hour, and none of you do. But she does. She has full access for the rest of her life. She's my daughter. I will always tend to her needs. That is how God sees you. And if you don't have that theology, Paul is saying, commanding, present your requests to God. Part of the reason I get so worked up interiorly is I don't involve God in my needs or what I'm afraid of. Involve God. Involve God. Involve God. And then finally, from the Old Testament, from the prophet Isaiah, this exhortation and promise: you will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you. So trust in the Lord forever. Maybe we need to be reminded that God is not just someone we talk to, but he is the sovereign king of history who can beat death, who did beat death. And he is our heavenly Father. He is the king, and he is the king of the universe. And we can trust not in ourselves, but in him. So trust in him forever. So, how do we practice this? Well, in a moment, I'm going to have my friend Archie come up, and he's going to play a song over us, and we're just going to take some time to reflect. But before we do that, I just want to get kind of practical about what this might look like. Jay said last week, and I love this, here's how to practice this. What does it look like for us to do this? The first thing is this. Jay said last week, I love this: examine your calendar and your list of tasks and eliminate one non-essential thing. By the way, that big project at work probably isn't included in that list, right? That's, hey boss, sorry, I don't think that this is really that essential, and that's not good. But All of us have things on our calendar that are non-essential. What is it honestly non-essential, and how can you delete it? To be able to prioritize, to give yourself space and margin to connect with God. And then also prayerfully consider one next step toward the way of Jesus that's currently non-existent in your way of life. Every year around January, we as a church talk about this, and we have these things called next steps. And we don't have these next steps because they're performative or because we have a program, but because in the early church, in Acts chapter 2, there's a descriptive list of how the church operated and behaved, and it's been that way for centuries, and we found it in our own lives to be unbelievably helpful. So we ask you the question, what is a next step that you might consider toward the way of Jesus that's currently non-existent in your own life? For example, some of you, it might just be gathering, coming to church on Sunday. I know this is going to say, you're a pastor, you have to say that. Honestly, I promise you, like if I don't come to church, I leak like a bad helium balloon. Not the Mylar ones that hold, but like the ones, the latex ones that are on the ground the next morning. I leak. I need to be reminded weekly of who God is, why he's central, and to be around you. I need it. So maybe a practice that's not currently in your life is just coming to church in a regular way to get filled up. Maybe that's your next step. Or maybe it's life groups. Being in a smaller community where you can share what's actually going on. This is wonderful to gather, but we don't have time or the space to really talk about what's actually going on in all of our lives. So being in a life group is a safe space for you to actually be known. Maybe it's to take a step into that. Maybe that's the next step in your life with Jesus. Or maybe it's serving. Maybe there's something you love to do, and being around other Christians could really help you get connected, be a part of a team, meet people. Or maybe it's something else, some area of your life that you need to grow in, that you want to grow in. One thing I do want to invite you to is on January 23rd and 24th, in just a couple of weeks, we have our annual church formation conference. Somebody once said to me pretty recently, they goes, church your size, you guys could probably do conferences all the time. Why don't you? And I'm like, well, yeah, we could. We'd just be exhausted all the time. Once a year, we have one formation conference because we want to keep the main thing the main thing. And a formation conference is just a chance for us to learn what does it look like for us to walk and become more like Jesus. We have a special guest, Ian Simpkins. He's brilliant. He's thoughtful. It's not just going to be lectures. We're going to practice this together. And I invite you to that. Just to slow down, figure out what it might look like for you. But right now, let's just take a moment as I read those verses over you one more time. And if you could, just close your eyes. And as Archie plays, and then as Archie sings, I just want you to do some inner work with God. If you could just close your eyes and let me read these verses again. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you as well. Don't be anxious about anything, but by prayer and petition, present your requests to God. And lastly, trust in the Lord forever. What might it look like for you to do that? As Archie sings, you're welcome to sing along or just sit there or pray or do work with God. But I pray that the Lord would minister in a way that only God can minister to you right now.